Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into the 11th and 12th centuries of Indian history today. And honestly, this era is a total paradox. On one hand, you've got this intense, landscape-altering military conflict, but then on the other, an absolute, unstoppable explosion of intellectual brilliance. It's a period of turning tides that literally shaped the subcontinent forever. Just look at the raw energy in this stone carving from the Lakshmana temple. You've got soldiers and elephants marching straight into battle. It perfectly captures the heavy, turbulent military reality of the time. The subcontinent was basically a giant chessboard of moving armies, ambitious kings, and brand new conquerors. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the turning tides, look at the Turkic invasions, dive into scholars and sciences, check out the economy and society, and wrap up with the lasting legacy. Number 1, the turning tides and setting the timeline. Timing is everything, right? And this period is all about crazy contrasts. Just look at how things split historically. Down south, between 95 and 1025, powerful native kingdoms like the Cholas are experiencing an absolute golden age. You have Rajaraja Chola I ruling with immense power, and Rajendra Chola launching massive naval expeditions to Southeast Asia. But simultaneously, if you look up north, relentless new invasions led by figures like Mahmud of Ghazni are striking hard. It's a complete historical duality. 2. The Turkic invasions and the conflict in the north. Now, before we get into the campaigns, we need to know who these invaders actually were. They were Turkic powers, meaning they hailed from a massive region stretching right across Central Asia. And leaders like Mahmud, they assumed the title of Sultan. That's an Arabic word meaning authority or power, so it was a very clear declaration of their sovereign rule as they pushed into new territories. So, here is a crucial contrast between the two most famous conquerors of this era. First, you have Mahmud of Ghazni. He ran 17 rapid cavalry campaigns into India, but his main goal? Plunder. He hit wealthy temples, packed up the immense wealth, and just withdrew back to Ghazni. Then, a bit later, comes Muhammad Ghori. His goal was entirely different. He was all about permanent territorial conquest. He left behind generals who actually laid the groundwork for what we now know as the Delhi Sultanate. Obviously, we can't talk about these campaigns without looking at the profound cultural impact. The historical texts describe some massive destruction. For example, the forces of Bakhtiar Khalji attacked what they thought was a military fortress. But actually, it was the famous Nalanda University, a Bihar or college. The tragedy of this is just staggering. This massive, multi-story library was set ablaze, and it reportedly burned for months. The sheer volume of knowledge lost is hard to even wrap your head around. Tibetan scholars were literally forced to flee back into the mountains, just carrying whatever manuscripts they managed to save. Along with this, the library was hit with a massive flash flood and lost to sea. 3. Scholars and sciences, the intellectual bloom. This builds such a fascinating contrast, because despite the brutal warfare and the tragic loss of centers like Nalanda, Indian science didn't just survive. In other regions, it hit an astonishing golden age. Take al-Biruni, a brilliant Persian scholar who basically traveled with Mahmud of Ghazni like an embedded reporter. He was obsessed with Indian science, but he noted with incredible self-awareness that Mahmud's destructive campaigns forced Indian scientists to retire far away and flee to places out of their reach, like Kashmir and Varanasi. The scholars were literally migrating to safe havens to keep the spark alive. Meanwhile, down in central India, native rulers were doing everything they could to preserve and advance this knowledge. Look at the Paramata king Bhoja of Dara. He wasn't just a king, the guy was a total polymath. He personally authored extensive texts like the Samarangana Sutradhara. That's this incredibly detailed treatise covering everything from temple architecture and town planning to early mechanical devices. His court became a massive magnet for scholars. Okay, let's wake your brains up for a second with an actual math puzzle from the 12th century. The famous mathematician Bhaskaracharya used poetry and animal imagery to teach complex formulas in his book Lilavati. He asks, and I quote, "Of a herd of elephants, half and one-third of the half went into a cave. 1/6 and 1/7 of 1/6 were drinking water, and the king of the elephants was leading 3 female elephants. Tell me how many elephants were there in the herd." It's just such a uniquely beautiful, engaging way to teach algebra, right? And it stuck around. Centuries later, people were still visualizing these exact problems. Take this 17th century manuscript illustrating the problems from Lillibody. It proves just how beloved and enduring this scientific and mathematical knowledge truly was across the subcontinent, surviving long after the empires of the 12th century had completely collapsed. Number 4, economy and society, looking at the agricultural backbone. Let's step away from the battlefields and royal courts for a minute and look at the everyday economic engine keeping all this running. Because the truth is, the incredible wealth that attracted conquerors in the first place was deeply rooted in agriculture. We're talking about a booming, highly interconnected network of regional specialties. You had saffron up in Kashmir, rich spices down in Kerala, ginger coming from Bengal, wheat from the northwest, and cotton from western India and the Deccan. And all of this was backed up by extensive irrigation works that regional kings built to protect against unpredictable monsoons. On the social side, you've got some remarkable progressive movements springing up too. Over in Kalani, the philosopher Basavana established the Anubhava Mandapa, which translates to the Pavilion of Experience. This was an incredibly progressive space where men and women from absolutely all social, economic, and linguistic backgrounds could just freely assemble. They gathered to openly debate philosophy, moral values, and religion. It was basically a giant ancient think tank. 5. A lasting legacy. Synthesizing the turning tides. Let's pull all these historical threads together. The defining characteristic of this entire era is this razor-sharp duality. On one side, you have profound destruction, the loss of ancient temples, the burning of massive universities like Nalanda, and dramatic political upheaval in the north. But on that exact same timeline, contrasted right against it, is the absolute unstoppable resilience of Indian culture. Scientific texts survived and evolved, regional agriculture pumped massive wealth into the economy, and progressive social debates thrived. I want to leave you with a thought to ponder today, looking at the brilliant minds of Bhoja and Bhaskaracharya and these thriving trade networks that kept churning despite the invasions. Why is it that throughout history, societies often produce their absolute greatest scientific and cultural leaps right when they are under the most extreme pressure? It's a wild paradox, and it's exactly what makes the 11th and 12th centuries so endlessly fascinating. And hey, if you want to master these complex historical tides, dive deeper into the sources we covered, and completely ace your upcoming exams on this chapter, you've got to grab our comprehensive study bundles. You can find the link mentioned right down in the description below. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning history.